So let's talk about the big bombshell today. Tucker Carlson has interviewed Vladimir Putin. The world has a ton of questions, and this interview is going to break everything. It's going to have more views than even the Trump-Clinton debate. The internet will explode, and mainstream media is already losing their minds. CNN says that Tucker is doing the bidding of the Kremlin, and he's essentially an empty vessel for Putin to spread propaganda. And this ironically makes everyone want to watch the interview even more. Now we really want to hear what Tucker will ask and what Russia has to say. I can't think of a bigger endorsement for this. But it kind of gets crazier. Tucker Carlson could be subjected to sanctions by the EU. According to Newsweek, the interview could see him get punished by Eurozone lawmakers. It could include economic sanctions and a travel ban to the Union. So there are big forces that obviously don't want Tucker Carlson to air the Russian point of view. But we must hear both sides of the story if we really want a lasting resolution to the conflict. It's just like those peace talks that exclude Russia from the conversation. It's a complete waste of time and just a one-sided affair. Now, this video isn't here to stir the pot, but to remind everyone of the importance of the interview, especially when it comes to the global economy. And this is what we'll focus on today. Now, whether you agree or disagree with Russia, it's undeniable that the last 2 years have changed the global economy. The financial world has been turned upside down, the US dollar is under siege, the BRICS they've expanded their membership, and the inflation crisis isn't going away.
This war has utterly reshaped the global military and trade alliances, and the sanctions that followed have as well. And in total, they have upended the world economy. The post-World War II economic order, the system that guaranteed prosperity in the West for more than 80 years, is coming apart very fast, and along with it, the dominance of the US dollar. These are not small changes, they are history-altering developments. They will define the lives of our grandchildren. Most of the world understands this perfectly well. They can see it. Ask anyone in Asia or the Middle East what the future looks like.
The economic world order is shifting. The sanctions thrown on Russia, they've accelerated everything. China's dumping US bonds, central banks are hoarding gold. Asia as a whole has ignored the West and they're still busy buying Russian oil. The old playbook is burning up, and what Putin says in this interview could very well change everything. So we're going to present 3 questions that need answers, and hopefully Tucker will ask them and the responses from Putin could add more clarity to the situation. Now the first question is simple but it underpins how trade alliances will evolve and the fate of Europe. And it's this: will Russia seek to restore relations with the US and the Eurozone? As of December last year, Russia is the most sanctioned country in the world. The West has imposed over 18,000 sanctions on them. That's almost double the sanctions on Iran, Syria, and North Korea combined. And this includes cutting Moscow away from the Western financial system and all the sanctions on Russian oil, like the price caps on crude. Now, obviously, the Russian economy is still standing, it isn't collapsing yet, like the West promised. But on the flip side, the boomerang effects of the sanctions are coming home to roost. 2 years later, Europe is still grappling with a horrible inflation crisis that's well above the 2% inflation target. While inflation is trending down, the delayed effect of the pain is being felt across the Eurozone. Take Germany for example. Their industrial production has collapsed again by 1.6% in November, bringing the index down to 92.7 points. And this is the 7th straight month of contraction. We are now back to the lows of 2010, showing how serious the decoupling from Russia has truly become. And the story gets even bleaker. Q4 GDP has contracted by 0.3%. With the global slowdown the world is facing, it's likely German industries will contract even further, pulling the entire economy into contraction. Now, how Putin answers this question of restoring relations is everything. If he goes so far as to say Russia is self-sufficient, then we can expect the pain to last longer for the EU. Deindustrialization won't stop, but if he throws out an olive branch or signals he's willing to talk, then the possibilities for recovery will be there. Now, this would of course likely require the EU to U-turn their energy sanctions and stop throwing additional punishments, right? It's a battle of financial attrition that's affecting the West as well. The IMF, they have upgraded Russia's economic growth for 2024. The Russian economy is expected to grow by 2.6% this year, and this signals stronger growth than any other G7 nations, much stronger than Europe or even the US. And this highlights the importance of Russian commodities and how getting access can lower inflation and improve industrial production as well. So it's not a surprise that China and India will continue to lead the world in economic growth this year and the next year. If Russia is willing to restore relations with the West over time, we could actually see a normalization of inflation and decoupling can be reversed. But of course, the West has to play ball as well. Now, the second question is just as important and it concerns the US dollar. Will Russia pursue or demand back their frozen reserves? Since the conflict began, the West has frozen $300 billion worth of Russian assets. This move alone has upended the global economy. It has created trust in Western assets like US Treasury bonds. It's a big reason why China has been dumping dollar assets over the past decade. The sanctions on Moscow has just accelerated the process. As of today, China now owns less than 3% of all outstanding US debt. Contrast that to a whopping 14% back in 2011. It tells you the collapse in trust Beijing has towards Washington. And this move away has real financial consequences such as keeping bond yields higher in the US. It has also caused money to flow into alternative assets like gold. Tucker needs to ask Putin this question because we are one step away from total confiscation of the reserves. The US is now planning with the G7 how to confiscate the money for Ukraine, which Russia calls 21st century piracy. And we are moving closer and closer towards this deadly possibility. Just 2 weeks ago, a US Senate committee approved legislation that would set the framework to seize the $300 billion for Ukraine. So this isn't just mere speculation, the gears are already turning. I hope Tucker asks if Russia expects to get back their money or not, and the answer will reveal a lot. Now, if Putin challenges the confiscation, which he likely will, then there's a chance of the West backing down and a possible return of the assets. And that will help slow the erosion of trust in the Western financial system. De-dollarization won't stop, but at least it won't go off a cliff in an instant. But if Putin gives up or acts like he doesn't care, then there could be a darker agenda behind it. Russia might be willing to give up the $300 billion to lay the seeds of a collapse in trust. Investors and central banks are already decoupling from Western assets like US bonds. US data itself shows a 13% drop in foreign holdings of treasury bonds over the past decade. It went from 43% down to 30%. And how bad this will get depends on Russia's stance on their frozen reserves. By not going after the reserves, that might be the ace in the hole Russia really wants to have, to give the world a bigger excuse to de-dollarize. And the last question revolves around the BRICS, the economic bloc and trade alliance that's posing a real risk to Western dominance. What are Russia's plans for the BRICS, or what does Russia hope to accomplish with the bloc? We need answers to this question straight from Putin himself. As it stands, BRICS now controls over 42% of global oil production and 35% of global consumption, and this means the bloc has power on both the supply and demand side. Russia, of course, is a big player in the oil production game. Over the past year, it's clear what Russia's intentions are when it comes to the energy trade. It's all about sidelining the US dollar and promoting bilateral trade in local currencies. Between China and Russia, de-dollarization is already happening. The Russian central bank revealed that the yuan's share in Russian exports, which is mostly oil and gas, has increased tremendously. It has gone from 0.4% to over 34% within the last 2 years. Instead of accepting US dollars or euros, Russia's promoting more bilateral trade in the Chinese yuan. They are accepting China's local currency. And what does Russia think about BRICS? Is Putin going to push for more trade outside of the US dollar, especially when it comes to oil? And this is a big question we need answers to. If more bilateral trade is done within the bloc in local currencies, this will reduce the dependence of the dollar in global trade, which will eventually boomerang back to the debt crisis America is facing, and it's not looking good today. The Congressional Budget Office is warning that interest payments in 2025 will exceed World War II levels. The interest growth is just getting out of hand. In 10 years' time, they expect the interest payments alone to hit almost 4% of US GDP. This could eventually lead to brutal budget cutbacks or even higher taxes on US citizens to balance the budget. If Russia is really hell-bent on de-dollarizing the world, this undoubtedly puts further strain on the US debt crisis. By reducing the demand for dollars, this could force interest rates to stay higher than normal, making the debt situation even worse. And what comes out of this interview has the potential to move the markets. It will give us a hint of the economic chaos to come. And once again, whether you like or you hate Russia, the questions Tucker Carlson asks and the answers Putin gives have the potential to change everything, so we must pay attention. Now, I'm sure there'll be a ton of pleasantries filled with the off-tangent topics, right? But we have to focus on the big economic issues on hand because it affects how the world order could really shift. Will Russia restore relations with the West? What is the fate of the frozen reserves? And what does Russia want with the BRICS? These questions need answers. No doubt a lot of people are against this interview, with the White House slamming it, saying that Putin should not be given another mouthpiece. I'm sure Tucker's gonna take a lot of heat for this daring interview, but whatever comes out is something we should pay close attention to. But let me know what you think. How do you think Putin will answer? And will the EU actually sanction Tucker Carlson over this? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.